Hey everyone, this is Jonah Johnson with you for another edition of JJ in the Field.
Hey everybody, Jonah Johnson, PCT Sales Agronomist with PCT Sunrise. Today we are in Central Ohio, just north of Uniopolis, and I want to get a quick note out to you guys in discussion around armyworm pests. So armyworm's a pest that we don't historically always see every year. It's a native pest to the deep south. The moss, the females typically fly up and come up into Ohio sometimes via heavy wind events, and so typically when we get inklings of this from the south, I usually like to follow the University of Kentucky and Purdue. They have quite intensive insect moth traps, and when we hear those numbers go up, that kind of helps us be on alert for scouting. So in north central and northern Ohio, we've seen a lot of armyworm feeding this spring, and so this pest, there's two of these pests. There's true armyworm and then there's fall armyworm, and they are two independent insects of each other, so they can't be categorized in the same bucket. So the feeding that we're seeing this year is, right at this point, is true armyworm. So armyworm is a pest of the grasses, the monocots typically, and so they like to feed on newly emerging corn, and then of course other grass crop we have actively growing is our wheat crop in Ohio, and so it can be quite detrimental on our active growing wheat right now. So if we start off with our wheat crop, the wheat crop right now for most Ohio should be in the grain fill period, and so with that happening, we're really concerned in keeping that flag leaf, which is the uppermost leaf that sticks off that stem and the head, and that is dumping in all the photosynthates from the sunlight through photosynthesis to make our grain. And so if those are compromised, hence through a disease, while we target those leaves for the fungicide or for head scab, or if we have an insect that's either chewing on those leaves, they can cut those leaves off, and then once it gets really bad, and that's what some guys in northern Ohio are experiencing right now, and when that head's up on top of the stem, they can actually cut that head completely off, and at that point we have a total loss of our wheat grain in that instance. So in corn, we're having that, this past year we've had a late season planting in some regards, a lot of weedy fields, and the moss are attracted to our grass cover crops. So if we see them planted, if we have this moss, if they laid eggs in a grass cover crop and we had a soybean crop emerging as that grass cover crop either died from its natural life cycle or was sprayed with a herbicide, those larvae are going to be attracted down to the green growing crop that's growing. Interesting enough, on soybeans, the armyworm larvae cannot get nutrition from the dicots, so they'll officially die from starvation. So in that instance, it doesn't warrant an insecticide application. Where it does going to warrant an insecticide application if we have heavy feeding on our corn plants, similar seedlings as we can see in this field behind me. So if you notice 50% or more of your field has a tattered leaf look to it, heavy feeding where you're noticing leaves maybe disappearing. It's hard to find these larvae feeding during the day because they usually feed at night. So to find them during the day, you'll want to dig down. If you have a no-till environment where we'll see them more than a tilled environment like we have here, you'll have to dig around the ground to try to find these insects during the daytime because they are nocturnal. So if you do find them, if you have 50% or more of your field with insect damage showing, and you find that these larvae are 1.25 inches in length or shorter, and you have a lot of them, that would warrant an insecticide application. If they're larger than 1.25 inches in length, that means that they're really close to pupating because they're going to go down the soil and then turn into their next life cycle. So at that point, so it becomes kind of a close quarters of knowing what size insect you're dealing with. In wheat, it's a little bit more necessity right now to be actively scouting your field. So like we mentioned, when we lose our leaf structure on that plant, it's kind of hard to associate a yield loss with that, but it's typically, you could be looking anywhere from a 30 to 50% yield reduction, and that's a very general term. I'd also recommend that you reach out to your crop insurance adjuster if it is insured and get their take on what damage you may be dealing with. So one caveat to your insecticide: if you are going to have to employ insecticide, make sure you look at those pre-harvest intervals, the PHIs, because some of those may be longer than how much longer the wheat crop will be out in the field. I anticipate most wheat crops are going to be a little bit later this year, and harvest probably won't happen for another 3 weeks or so. That's kind of a generalization across Ohio. So hopefully that'll help you make a managed decision on your armyworm feeding. So if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to us, and hope that will help you out a little bit. So for this is Jonah T. Johnson. Thanks for watching.